watching Inside Thunder Basketball with Darnell Mayberry. I'm sports editor Mike Sherman, the Oklahoman, here with our beat writer Darnell Mayberry. We're talking about the hottest team in the league. The Oklahoma City Thunder has won 5 in a row. And Darnell, you wrote something very interesting on your Thunder Rumblings blog. You basically said Sunday night against Utah, when the two teams were playing, if you didn't know anything about reputation, if you're just walking off the streets and saw this game, you would have sworn that Russell Westbrook is the franchise player and Kevin Durant is the sidekick.
Yeah.
What's behind that?
Well, when you watch the games, Russell Westbrook controls so much of this offense. I mean, everything goes through him right now, and Kevin Durant is sort of he's sort of a spot-up shooter. I mean, that's what he's been reduced to a little bit in the past few games. If you look at the way Russell Westbrook is controlling the game, everything goes through him offensively. He's controlling the pace defensively for the most part. So the way he's just playing on both ends of the court, his impact, I think, is greater right now on this team than Kevin Durant's.
Now, when Durant walked to the free throw line, Darnell, they were chanting MVP for him, not for Westbrook.
Well, that's because he's the sexy, player on the team. He's the one averaging 29.6 points. He's the one that's in the MVP discussion, and rightfully so. I mean, he deserves to get the MVP chance. He had 35 points against the Jazz. Russell Westbrook had 30 points and 11 assists, so I think he had a greater imprint on that game than Kevin Durant.
So what you're saying is, as Russell Westbrook goes, so goes the Thunder?
Definitely.
Okay, on to the next topic. That game last night, the win over the Utah Jazz. How much should we read into it as far as looking ahead to the playoffs, especially about which of these two teams is stronger in the playoffs?
Well, Scott Brooks in his post-game press conference always, credits the other team, or at least he makes excuses for the other team when he says, they're without their best player. Last night, I thought for the first time, or one of the first times, it was warranted. They were without Andre Karolinko, Mehmet Okur, and their backup point guard, Ronnie Price. Without those three, Utah is a completely different team. Andre Karolinko can change the floor defensively for the Jazz. Mehmet Okur can stretch the court offensively. And Ronnie Price is an upgrade over the Gaines kid out of the D-League. So Utah is a completely different team. The 3-0 record that I think that the Thunder has right now, I wouldn't read too much into that. I think they're going to be a different team come playoff time. They're more experienced than the Thunder. I think that could win out.
Which of those absences had a greater impact on the game?
I think Andre Karolinko. I mean, to see Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook go for 30 or more, I don't think that would have happened if Karolinko was in the game. He definitely probably could have limited Durant more than C.J. Miles. They might have been able to put him on Russell Westbrook and at least try to hold one of those guys to under 30 points. So the fact that Andre Karolinko is such a good defensive player when he brings his A game, I think that could have changed the face of the game.
Okay, the Thunder was without one of their key players too. James Harden missed his second game with an injury. Darnell, how does the Thunder look different and play different without Harden?
Well, surprisingly, they're still scoring. I mean, you look at what they're doing. I mentioned the 30-plus points that Durant and Westbrook had. I think their starters are playing more minutes. Jeff Green is getting into the offensive flow more with Harden out. The bench is not going to score as much because Kyle Weaver, who they called up from the D-League, is not going to be that scorer. He's not going to put in 10 points a game like James Harden did. But for the most part, they're going to give their starters more minutes, and the rotation is going to be shorter than it once was, and that's been the main difference so far.
Okay, finally, Darnell, the Thunder's on the road all week this week. Wednesday at Charlotte, Friday at Toronto, then back in the States Sunday in Indiana. They've won 41 games, which exceeds any projection for them, including my own, including your own. Yep. But now they're on this pace for 51 games, and you start looking at games like this week, and you start chalking up the wins.
Yeah.
What is the cautionary note, though, in the midst of these 3 road games for the Thunder?
Well, you have to be able to continue to play well on the road like the Thunder has done all season. Charlotte is a pretty good team. You can't just go in there and think you're going to win. With Steven Jackson and Gerald Wallace, they have some athletic players who can get after you. Toronto sort of in a tailspin right now. I wouldn't worry too much about that game. And Indiana, the same thing as Toronto. But Charlotte, you have to make sure you go in there with energy and effort like you did against Utah. But the one thing that you look at the schedule, this team is on a 5-game winning streak right now, and they could extend it and match that 9-game streak when you look at Charlotte, Toronto, Indiana, and then back home against San Antonio, who they played tough the last time. Tony Parker's out with that wrist injury, so this team's winning streak could continue and go on to that 9-game winning streak.
Thanks, Darnell. That's all for this edition of Inside Thunder Basketball with Darnell Mayberry, but you can stay with the best coverage team anywhere, every day at News OK, and every morning in the Oklahoman.